Hey guys, Mrs. Fox here with part 2 of your 7.3 PowerPoint on Reconstruction after the Civil War. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, then stop and go back and watch part 1 first. Don't forget I might not always mention left-hand side questions, but make sure you'll be writing those down as we get through our lecture. We were just wrapping up the Freedmen's Bureau. Remember, not all Southerners are happy about this. Some are, most aren't. They wanted to maintain their white supremacy, believing that they were better than blacks as they had been taught for many generations, and even science and things of the time, a lot of it supported that notion, even though it was complete farce and not true. And so they don't like this racial equality. And so the Freedmen's Bureau was a dangerous place to work. They often got threats, and schools were, set on fire, and all kinds of things happened to try to prevent African Americans from being successful, to try to prevent the Freedmen's Bureau from being successful. So it was a very tense time and, unsafe in a lot of areas. Here's some pictures of the Freedmen's Bureau schools. Remember, that's about a third of their budget they spent trying to educate African Americans. Over 3,000 white teachers from the North end up moving down south to help the Southern schools get started and offer this free education. This was a free service to any African Americans that wanted it, as well, of course, as teachers in the South also participating in this program as well. Okay, but there's two sides to every story, right? If you take a look at this old newspaper clipping, this is a pro-white newspaper. Okay, so not everybody in the South is happy about this. If you look at the tagline, you guys, the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency to keep the Negro in idleness at the expense of the white man. Okay, twice vetoed by the president, but made a law by Congress. They're trying to say, like, if you do this, you support African Americans, and they didn't like that. And they draw a very stereotypical African American with tattered clothing and large facial features and stuff, try to poke fun at the African Americans because they're trying to promote the white man's agenda. Okay. All right. Of course, we've got video clips for you. Make sure you take a look at some of those. Help yourself understand the Freedmen's Bureau. All right, so of course you probably remember from the end of the Civil War, one of the most famous events in history is that Lincoln gets assassinated. The poor guy only lives a few days after the Civil War is over before he is shot by John Wilkes Booth, right? And so his vice president becomes the next president. So Andrew Johnson becomes the 17th president of the United States, all right? I know sometimes you guys are interested, so in case we haven't talked about it yet, who's been assassinated while they were in office? Well, Abraham Lincoln was first, but he is not alone. We've had 3 other presidents who have been assassinated, including Garfield, McKinley, and JFK, John F. Kennedy. And not to mention, another 17 presidents minimum have had serious threats on their life. Some of them, like Reagan, even being shot but surviving. Okay, so anyways, Johnson becomes president, 17th president of the United States. Now here's the deal. Remember, Lincoln, brotherhood, and let's forgive the South, and 10% plan, and take it easy on the Confederates, and, we need an attitude of love and understanding, and we need equality, and everybody's created equal, and quoting the Declaration of Independence in speeches, and, pro-anti-slavery and wanting to end slavery is Lincoln. Okay, he put Johnson on his ticket when he ran for president, Lincoln did, to help balance out his ticket because Johnson is a Democrat. Okay, Johnson has almost polar opposite views of Abraham Lincoln. And so it made Abraham Lincoln more palatable to some of the people that were on the fence about which way to vote, and it helps him win. Okay, but now he's dead, and so his VP, Andrew Johnson, like the opposite of Lincoln, gets into office. Okay, so here's the deal with Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson used to be a slaveholder. He is super racist, okay? And he doesn't hide it either. He's from the South, so he's going to have huge Southern sympathies about how to treat former Confederates and moving forward with Reconstruction. He's a Democrat. He's from the opposite party of Lincoln. Okay, so all of Lincoln's visions and the country's visions of what we're going to do with Reconstruction and kind of the kumbaya version of this and getting people help like the Freedmen's Bureau and all this stuff, it is all going to be threatened when Johnson comes into office because he didn't like Lincoln's 10% plan. He's a Southerner and he used to own slaves, right? So he's kind of pro-Confederate viewpoint in a lot of ways. He has one goal during his presidency, and that's to bring the Democratic Party back into power. Okay, he has more vetoes in office because remember, Congress is making laws, right? Well, Congress at that time was controlled by Republicans, right? His enemy. Okay, Lincoln's good party, but not according to Johnson, right? So Congress, majority of Congress people are Republican at that time. And so bills, remember this process, get kicked up to the president when they're ready to get signed off and hopefully turned into laws. Well, Andrew Johnson will veto more bills than like the last 3 or 4 presidents combined before him because he constantly is trying to make more lenient Reconstruction laws and not agreeing with Republicans' vision of Reconstruction. Okay, so yeah. For example, when he gets into office, Lincoln had dismissed several Confederate leaders from positions of power. Like, hello, you committed treason. No, you can't be governor of the state. Or no, you can't be mayor of, whatever town. Okay, he pulled a lot of those ex-Confederate people from power. Lincoln did. Well, when Johnson gets into power, take one guess at what he does. Hey, all my Confederate buddies, come on back. You guys can have your positions again. And he puts a lot of people back into power who definitely were pro-Southern viewpoint, okay? Anti-equality kind of people. For example, the Freedmen's Bureau we just got done talking about that did all these awesome and amazing things to try to help the freed African Americans, make their way to this equality and newfound freedom and get them on their feet. Johnson tries to shut that down on more than one occasion, okay? But Congress doesn't let him, right? So thank goodness for 3 branches of government, guys, right? Thank goodness all the power is not one person in charge. Okay, so of course the North is devastated that Lincoln has died. He has become a symbol of, of peace and prosperity and equality, and now he's dead. And the North is just devastated to see the opposite of him, Johnson, become the 17th president, while the South cheers, okay? They're all thrilled. Maybe not excited that Lincoln died. Nobody necessarily wants to see anybody die, or not most people, but they definitely are excited that now Johnson is in charge, okay? Because a lot of the Southerners did not like or trust Lincoln in office. If you're not ready, push pause. Otherwise, draw a line underneath everything we just wrote all the way across your page. Of course, we got some video clips. Check those out, guys. Moving on. Q5, black codes. Write it down on the right. Highlighted yellow. All right. So, the South. Very unhappy about the changes Reconstruction is bringing. Very unhappy about losing their free labor source. Very unhappy about their world getting turned upside down. Very unhappy that their land is, decimated from war and they didn't win. A lot of Southerners not happy people right now. They resented being forced to legally have to live as an equal with people that they had once regarded as private property. Like, I used to own you. Literally, I used to own you. You were private property, and now I'm supposed to treat you as an equal? What? Like, this did not make sense to a lot of Southerners. And so they find their way around a lot of things Reconstruction's trying to do and the Freedmen's Bureau is trying to do with these things called black codes. Because, of course, there is Union military presence throughout the South as this Reconstruction period is taking place, okay? That will continue to actually escalate to more and more military control in the South because things start getting out of hand. The resentment from Southerners will break out into violence, and there's a lot of riots and scrimmages and beaten beatings of African Americans and even murders of African Americans just for walking on the sidewalk too close to a white person, or not tipping their hat and saying, "Hi, sir," "Hi, ma'am," and being, acting like they're underneath a white person. African Americans would get beaten, tortured, killed. Okay, so there's a lot of violence by upset Southerners taking place. And the Southerners are also upset that not all people in the South agree with them. There are Southerners who actually agree with the Northern viewpoint about Reconstruction and the Freedmen's Bureau and that slavery should have ended and stuff. And so those are called scallywags, by the way, from people in the South. If you were a Southerner who's on board with Reconstruction, you were a scallywag, you traitor, right? And they also got really annoyed at a lot of Northerners moving down into the South to like work in the Freedmen's Bureau or to teach African Americans, or the military moving down to keep an eye on the South and make sure they're following the 13th Amendment and all these rules that are getting put out. And the South is getting sick of it. They called those Northerners that would move down and be in their way and in their business carpetbaggers, because the bags they'd bring with them, the luggage at the time was often made out of this carpet material. So you'd see stagecoaches and stuff coming in with all these carpet bags, and so they'd call the Northerners carpetbaggers coming in to settle in the South and keep an eye on them. And the South got ticked. They were mad. They don't like any of this. And so they figure out ways to try to put African Americans in their proper place, according to them. And one of the ways they did that was black codes. So what is a black code? A black code was any type of law. There's more than one. There were dozens and dozens of black codes, guys, and they varied from state to state. Not all states necessarily had the same ones, but any black code is a law that somehow limited the rights or freedoms of an African American. So a racist law, okay? Any laws that were getting passed that were racist by any southern state was called a black code. So there's lots of them out there. Some examples for you guys. It would find loopholes to deny African Americans the right to vote. They would prohibit intermarriage among races. So if you were one part of the couple was white and the other part was black, you were not allowed to marry, which, by the way, tells you right there that not everyone was racist and not everyone was all putting blacks in their place and whites are superior. Not everybody agreed with that super asinine logic, because the fact they had to make a law in the first place saying if you're a white and a black person together, you can't get married, tells you right there that there were black and white couples and some of them wanted to get married. So not everybody was a racist bigot, okay? But unfortunately, a lot of people in the South were. Other things that black codes did, they denied rights of African Americans to be able to serve on juries. If you were accused of a crime in a courtroom, you more typically were found guilty as a black person, and then the punishment that you would receive for the same crime as if a white person had done it was way more severe if you were black than if you were white. There were laws about preventing them from owning land, even though they're now free and should be able to buy and purchase land if they had the money. They made almost all occupations need a special type of license or certificate you needed to apply for the job or be able to get a job that cost money, because a lot of African Americans in the very beginning have little to no money, right? And it was hard to get these licenses, obtain them to be able to get work. So anything they could do to just keep the African American down, like kick them down to their proper place in Southern attitudes, frame of mind. Of course, totally wrong, super racist, and thank goodness there were people in the world that didn't agree and fought for equality, like people of the North, those carpetbaggers coming in and fighting for the Southerners. Or the African Americans, and also some Southerners. Again, you guys, some Southerners were all for all of this. Not everybody agreed and was a super racist person. Okay, there are Southerners, remember, they're called scallywags, that did support Reconstruction and the Freedmen's Bureaus and all that stuff. But unfortunately, a lot of people in power, especially while Johnson was president and let all these people in power that agreed with him and were racist, did things like pass black codes. just a travesty for these newly freed African Americans. All right, draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. And of course, we've got video clips. Check those out, okay? And then we're going to cover Q6, the Civil Rights Act, when we come back for part 3. So when you're ready, come join me for that. Until then, have a nice day.